Welcome to another edition of Stand Alone, where we go from being ordinary to extraordinary. The truth is, none of us are ordinary. We just feel like it at the moment in time, and we have to find our extraordinary. So I like to connect with guests that are just doing that hard work on a continuous basis. Some of the people that I get to run into and collide in this short time that we're on planet Earth, they just hit differently. And so, today I have a very special guest with us, and just hearing his story, which I think is incredibly important, it will find ways for us to get better. And stand alone is really just about leading our life, not just letting things happen to us, but then examining why is this happening and how can I get better. And so, Ryan Dusick, you are a former member of Maroon 5. You've lived an extraordinary life. When people read your book, Harder to Breathe, I think it's such a great title because a lot of us feel this right now, where it is sometimes hard to breathe. And for you in that moment, someone else looking on the outside, it looked like you had it all. You were living the life that so many people dream about, but you felt like you were drowning and you couldn't come up for air. And I want us to go into this together, step by step, because where you are today is so different than where and how you got started. But in you examining your past, you were able to unravel the layers of who you are and why you had to overcome so much. And now you help other people, which, Ryan, I just think that's the calling of our life. Everything we go through is so we can help someone else get through it also. And so I just want to say welcome. And before I ask you, your first question, I just want to say thank you for your bravery and just, revealing some really harsh realities of your past, because it's not easy to do that. It's easier for us to look all pampered, like we have it all together. So I just want to say thank you for your bravery in doing that. My first question to you is, why is this important to you? Like, as we go in and we will go into your past and what got you, why, if you could just share with the audience that are top performers wanting to get better, why is this important for you in your journey right now to share with people your journey of hardship and to be where you are right now as a clinician, as someone who has dedicated their life going back to school to be able to help people in therapy? Why is this important to you right now?
Well, first off, thank you so much, Sabrina, for the kind words and for that introduction. You kind of touched on it in your preface there, the idea of service, of doing for others. That notion changed my life completely, from one of self-obsession and one of feeling sorry for myself and one of anxiety and depression and alcoholism to one of purpose and fulfillment and meaning. It was just the spark of service that really led to all of that for me very early on in my recovery from those things. And a decade after I left the band, when I had been really struggling, it was the introduction of the fact that I could actually offer another human being something helpful. That was mind blowing to me because I felt like I had nothing to offer for a long time. And so, following that spark forward, it kind of led to all these different opportunities that my eyes were open to that they hadn't been before, just because I was open to things that were outside of myself, that were helpful to other people. And everything that I do today is an outgrowth of that. Writing this book, Harder to Breathe, was an opportunity to recognize that some of the things I struggled with could be helpful to other people, that by telling my story, not only would it be therapeutic for me and cathartic for me, but that others might be able to see themselves in my journey and therefore find hope in the things I've been able to do in recovery. Um, Going back to school and becoming a therapist and a coach and a speaker and starting my own podcast, the Harder to Breathe podcast, all of these things are just an outgrowth of that initial impulse to be of service. Of course, I have my own ambitions and things I want to do that are um, fulfilling for me on the level of having projects and being creative and being entrepreneurial and being ambitious in my own life. But at the core of it is that sense of service. It's getting out of self-obsession. It's not about me at the end of the day. It's about what legacy I can leave in the world. And if that means helping one person or it means helping 1,000 people, and I can be sustainable in the way that I do that, then that's a wonderful life at this point for me to live. And it's a different place than I had been before I found that spark.
Yeah, and I think it's just forever evolving and getting better because, you're on the right track. And I just want to commend you for going through that patch, which actually served you, and for very, it's hard for people to understand that because when we're going through a hard time, we're like, I don't even want the lesson anymore. I just want to like have a normal life. And I know that when someone asked you that profound question, which I actually want to save to the end, but because it's coming up right now, when someone asked you, Ryan, what do you think your purpose is? It hits you differently. And you just answered like, I don't really have an answer right now. I don't even want to think that far. Just want to make it to tomorrow. So
Mm,
let's dive into this, the process. For a lot of people in today's world, Ryan, we are all to some extent very self-obsessed because we live
mhm.
in an environment that supports this behavior and it's very destructive. Um, and then we get into environments where we can ask better questions of ourselves and what is our purpose. But when you were starting off, and we're all young, we all want to make something of ourselves. When you were, going into baseball and then, getting into the band and building your skills, was this something that you wanted? Did you want fame? Or was that why it was always uncomfortable for you when the dream was coming together that you're like, actually, I don't even want anything to do with this?
I really don't think that fame was ever the ultimate goal. I know that that's something that people, and it's nothing new. They seek out fame as much as they do accomplishment or um, just having a career in the arts or otherwise. Um, for me, that wasn't the end all be all. It wasn't I want to be famous. Of course, we wanted to make music that people appreciated, and the idea of selling millions of records uh, was appealing because if you're gonna, set out to create something, you want as big an audience as you can have to enjoy what it is that you've spent all that time and energy developing. Um, but I didn't sit around thinking about, if I'm going to be famous and be on TV and that kind of thing. My heroes, I came of age in the early 90s, and my heroes were uh, Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and a lot of the alternative rock bands of that era. And at least aesthetically, they projected this image that they didn't really care about all that stuff. They weren't caught up in the lifestyles of the rich and famous. They were more concerned with creating art that came from a deep place within them and that they connected with people that could see themselves in their art. It was very in some ways very unpretentious in that regard, but in other ways kind of pretentious because it was very self-reflective and heavy and deep. For whatever reason, I connected with that, and those were my heroes in terms of what I wanted to do musically and with a career. I have to say, of course, we were probably a little naive in terms of what the world of the entertainment business was and what would come of that. But we really went into it just starting a band, just wanting to play for our friends, play clubs around town. Um, and with dreams of signing a deal and going out on the road and making albums and all that stuff. But it was very innocent. It wasn't anything more than I love Pearl Jam. I want to be just like Pearl Jam. That's basically what it was. And we emulated our heroes when we started out. I mean, I was 16 years old when we started the band, and it's funny looking back because we were pretty ambitious. I mean, we had pretty realistic goals in terms of initially it was just making a demo tape, taking it to the local clubs here in LA on the Sunset Strip, and booking gigs at the Whiskey A Go Go and the Roxy Theater and the Troubadour. That all seemed pretty feasible, and those were things that we accomplished pretty quickly. And I was kind of the hustler of the group. I was the one because I was 16 and I had a car, and I had been in my older brother's band before that, and I knew kind of the ropes of that world. I was going around and booking the gigs. I was keeping the mailing list and selling tickets to our friends and family. And so without, really thinking of myself as an entrepreneur, I was kind of the hustler in the group. Um, but it was modest in terms of what we were seeking out and I don't know. I'm sure on some level we wanted attention. I'm sure that on some level it was wouldn't it be nice if you got the adulation of people appreciating your work? But it still was really just for the joy. For the longest time, it was just about the joy of creating something together, developing something together, and seeing yourself having a life and a career around something you're passionate about, which is what we were.
Yeah, as a therapist right now, you can look at your past with different eyes, with a different brain, actually,
Yeah.
to be able to go through all the things that you endured through. I would just like to ask you, for a lot of people that grapple with this today that are young and that feel like, well, I don't care about money, I don't care about those things, and then so they don't have structure in their life, so they don't
Mhm.
have an ambition. That's not the answer either. That's not like the answer isn't just I'm a free bird and nothing's holding me down and money doesn't rule me. Could you
Right.
speak on that from your experience of like what you went through to help people understand like there's nothing wrong with being ambitious. There's nothing wrong with going through what you have to go through to get to a better place. Just so people don't have that guilt on them when they feel like I want to do something with my life. I want to become
Mhm.
something. But then to go deeper and say, well, why is that? Is it because I want to serve other people, or is it because I want to be self-absorbed and be famous? Well, why do you want to be famous? What's the point?
Mhm.
So, how does your brain as a therapist help to encourage people today, so they're not stuck grappling like with, I have ambition, but am I being selfish by going after goals?
Mhm. Well, I think we have a tendency, and this is just human nature, I think, to think that we have to choose one extreme or the other. And you see this individually. I see it in my clients. You see it societally in terms of the tribalism and all that stuff that goes on. But within a person, I think we think it's either, well, I'm going to be completely consumed with myself and how I'm going to get ahead and have success in the world in a very material sense, or I'm going to be completely selfless
Mm,
and give of myself completely and not be concerned with selfish things. Or, I'm going to be an idealist and pursue only that which is completely true to my deepest self. These are those are all ideals that one can aspire to, and there's nothing wrong with any of them inherently. It's just when we go into the extremes of focusing only on that one thing to the exclusion of balance. Right. So, I mean, at the core of a lot of the things that I work on in any realm of mental health is the idea of balance, because we can and we have to be concerned with taking care of ourselves in this world. We have needs, we have wants. If we neglect those things, we're either going to be neglectful of self, or we're going to be miserable because we're constantly giving everything away and have nothing left for ourselves. Right. So it's not about denying self completely in order to be a good person. We all have to think about taking care of ourselves and what uh, a good life looks like, what a free life looks like, being able to um, have a life that you don't have to worry about some of the basic needs being met on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, right? So there's nothing wrong with aspiring to that level of ambition in that regard, but we also need to be mindful that caring about others and being able to not only think about ourselves is also important. If we go to the other extreme and we think about only that, then we neglect self. But if we don't do that, then we end up becoming self-obsessed and narcissistic. So there's a balance between these extremes that I think exists, where you can be mindful of, um, you know, taking care of self, but also thinking of others. But then also in terms of the passion, it's not all or nothing in terms of I'm going to do exactly what I want to do, and I don't have to think about worldly problems like money and how I'm going to have a future and have security. I think you can do both at the same time. You can, you know, uh, uh, chew and hop on one foot at the same time, so to speak. It's like if you're thinking about only making money, if you're thinking about just taking care of yourself in that regard, then you're going to miss out on what's really important in life, right? You're going to miss out on the passion and the things that are most valuable. What are your values? What actually gives you purpose in life? What gives you meaning in life, right? But if you're thinking only in those terms and you're neglecting, the sort of rational things you need to think about logically about how you're going to sustain that, what's sustainable, how am I able to bring in enough of an income in my life that I'm able to pursue those things, that I have the freedom to pursue those things. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. That was the phrase I was looking for. um, it's not either or is the point. It's there's a balance between these things. I think we can be ambitious and take care of ourselves, but also, ponder what is this all for? Why am I doing this? Why is this important? If you're not driving that ambition with some sense of purpose, something that's meaningful to you, that's consistent with your value system, then you can get off the rails and get off track pretty easily.
Yeah, I don't think people talk about this enough. We are in such a soundbite society where people work so hard, then they hear like a sentence that a successful person says right now, and they're like, "Oh, that's what I have to do." And we hang on to that one sentence, but there's so much more. And like to go deeper with it, I think is incredibly important. Thank you for saying that. With balance too, what does it mean to be a balanced person? Sometimes in my business, I'm very careful with using this word because
Mm,
for people, when they hear me say balance, their meaning of balance is like mediocrity and just I do everything like okay and I don't strive because then I'm out of balance. And
mhm.
so for me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I try to explain people like it's integration. You have different components of your life that have to flow together. Like physically, you have to be well, spiritually, you have to be well, relationships, finances, all these things have to get integrated into your life. So, how do you define balance when you're helping someone achieve that? How do you explain it to them?
Well, balance there's not one equation that equals balance. I think when people hear that word, they think, well, you need a 50-50 split between work and personal life. You need a 50-50 split between, all of these things in your life in order to create a balance between them. I think balance can be different for different people, and everyone has their own priority list in terms of what is that number one. For some people, their passion and purpose in life is their family, or it is their friends, or it is their hobby. And so everything else they do is to facilitate that. For some people, their passion and purpose is their work. And I
Yep.
don't think that necessarily makes you a workaholic. If that's what you care about, that's what fills you up and gives you a sense of flow in your life. I think you can work a lot of hours and be ambitious and build a life around your career that is very fulfilling and balanced. I just think people run into problems when they are neglecting self in the process of pursuing external success or accomplishment, because you can pursue anything and you can be absolutely driven to do it, but you have to take care of yourself in the process, and your mindset and your emotional well-being and the ways that you keep yourself grounded have to be in place. Otherwise you're going to get out of whack, right? So it's about emotional regulation. It's about you know it's mental health as much as it is physical health. If you get up every day and you center your day around your work, but you're feeding yourself well, you're making sure you get some exercise, you are making some time to make sure that you have personal relationships and not just business relationships. You can work a lot of hours and spend a lot of your energy on that ambition and be balanced. It's not a one size fits all equation, right? You just have to make sure that you have self awareness in terms of, it's like, if this is becoming number one and all these other things are suffering, is that really sustainable? Is a business that's based on one thing and not around something that's actually going to prevent it crashing and burning in the future. You have to think about what is actually most sustainable. Somebody running a company who's out of whack and is like flying off the handle and yelling at people because they're not emotionally regulated, or because they're stressed out to the point where they haven't slept in 4 days. Is that the wisest thing for the future and long-term sustainability of your business? No, of course not. So balance is something that comes into play no matter what you're doing. I look at it kind of like whether you're in your personal life dealing with your relationships, or you're in your professional life dealing with those relationships, or your work. You kind of have to look at yourself like a ninja, like you're going at it with things are coming at you, and you can slow it all down and be calm and be like water, as they say in Eastern philosophy. Whatever comes at you, you can be calm, you can be zen, you can be able to deal with it in a way that's healthy, and that you're actually able to react to it and respond to it in a way that gives the best outcome, that you're able to use that energy to your advantage. If you're out of whack and you're reactive and you're not able to find balance in the middle of all of the stress in your life, whether they be personal things or business things, then you're not going to respond to those things as well as you can. Right. So do you see the distinction there? It's about how balance is something you carry into the things that you do. It's not just an equation of amounts of time that you do each of those things.
Yeah, this is powerful. And I think for people to really internalize this and to understand what do they value the most, and it's also what do you value the most at that time in your life, because that shifts and that changes, and then just reevaluating. One of the things that you went through, which I feel like a lot of people are going through this right now, because we hear this word thrown around a lot, identity.
Mm,
And then we have people that are having like identity crisis, and
mhm,
it then ties into career meltdowns that I see people having to grapple with. You know, for people today, uh, we want so much. Ryan, we want so much, we want it so fast. And sometimes I bet as a therapist, you just want to just say to someone, like, just relax, just calm down, just, take it easy. What is happening to people today when their identity is so heavily intertwined with just one thing, and
mm.
we are not grounded in other areas of our life? And then that one thing just gets pulled away from us. And then, we lose our sense of self, because that's really what's happening. And then what happens, I've seen this, it manifests where these people go into attack mode, like everything is everyone's fault and they're not doing
Mm.
the work on themselves. And it's like, oh man, let me get out of the way here. Like, this is a destructive path. What can you speak on from your area of expertise of just working with people through identity? Because I think that's what you did so beautifully. You and you were even getting triggered, like you'd go to a Maroon 5 concert and it would like re-trigger you. Then you're like, I gotta go back to work on myself, to really clean that out of you and to understand on a deeper level who you are as a human being.
Well, I think it would be helpful in answering that question to tell a little bit of my experience in that regard, because uh, I didn't really put a lot of thought of it. Of course, when we started the band, I was a teenager and I was just pursuing a passion. Uh, Looking back now, I think that I allowed myself to wrap my entire identity around being the drummer in that band. And it wasn't that I didn't have other things going on for me or that I didn't have other skill sets or talents or things that I was passionate about. I had a wonderful family. I had been good in school. I had been a baseball player growing up. Um, I think I was a sensitive and compassionate person by nature. I had, person skills, people skills, human skills that maybe didn't always come out in the world that I was performing in. Um, but I didn't really think about those things because we were thinking primarily about the music and about performance and about making records and about growing our fan base. And um, I think that especially once we started to have some success, it became very easy to think of myself and my entire self definition as one fourth and then one fifth of the band that was then Maroon 5. And so I wasn't aware that that was happening until I had to leave the band. And I went through this really difficult transition where I just didn't know who I was anymore. My entire identity, my entire self definition had been ripped away from me, and it destroyed my self confidence, my self esteem. I didn't feel like I had any real purpose or direction or value, even though I had had these other things in my life that were meaningful to me. I'd had these things that were purposeful and that gave my life meaning. I just couldn't see any of that at that point because I had been so wrapped up in the importance of the band in my life. And it took me a decade of suffering to discover new meaning and purpose and new identity. What happened for me that was the turning point that made me realize what I'd been struggling with and what was the way out of it was that I think I had thought because everything had come pretty easily to me up until that point, because we had been so blessed in a way that most people aren't with the band in terms of having this wonderful experience and then it eventually turning into success, uh, was that this was something that was sort of ordained, that we were entitled to, that we had this innate talent and we worked really hard for, and therefore we were going to be blessed with this thing forever. And I think that I thought of identity, as a lot of people do, as something that God or the universe or the circumstances of your life bestows on you if you're lucky enough to have it. And then you live the rest of your life knowing what your purpose is, right? Um, until that was taken away from me. And it was when I was in recovery, very early recovery from alcoholism and anxiety disorder, um, and the grief of that loss, that I discovered service, as we were talking about at the top, and realizing that I had something to offer other people that had nothing to do with Maroon 5. It had to do with my people skills. It had to do with things I had gained in my own struggle and overcoming my own problems. And so I realized that not only did I have other purpose that I could latch onto as something meaningful, but I realized that purpose is fluid. It's not something that's stagnant throughout the course of your life. It's not something that's ordained on you by some greater being necessarily, unless you believe in that kind of thing. It's something you can choose, and it's something that you can create for yourself. You can decide, this is what matters to me. This is the thing that gives my life purpose. And you can pursue that thing wholeheartedly and create meaning in your life. I'm very existential in my thinking in that regard. Meaning is relative. We create meaning. And as human beings, that is one of the central tasks of our lives, is to find and create meaning for ourselves. What does it all mean for us? Because we can believe a lot of different things, and there's nothing wrong with having a value system that's based on a religion or some other beliefs, value system that somebody has created for you. But that's faith. That's believing something that you don't necessarily have proof of, right?
Right.
For us, we have to choose that that is what means something to us, or choose something else that has meaning for us. And we have to create that meaning within our life. So whether it's going to church every weekend and deciding this is the most important thing in my life, this is what has meaning for me, and I'm going to be a good Christian or Jew or Muslim or whatever it is that you believe in, or if it is, here's my personal value system that I've created for myself, this is what matters for me, I'm going to pursue that and make that meaningful. At the end of the day, we all have the same task, was just to choose what it is that we decide is meaningful to us and to pursue that. And that's where we find purpose in our lives. Whether that is choosing, I'm going to be the greatest mom ever, choosing, I'm going to be the greatest CEO ever, choosing, I'm just going to be a good person and I'm going to give of myself and take care of myself at the same time. There's so many different ways in which you can find purpose in this life, and it's relative to the person. There's no absolutes in terms of what is meaningful. But we have that responsibility and that freedom to choose for ourselves. And so for me, it was deciding, well, if I choose a path of service, rather than being so consumed with all of my problems and with the ways in which, life broke my heart, and was whether it was God or the universe that robbed me of this life that I was supposed to have. I was supposed to be this rock star, and I'm not able to do that anymore. Like, what is that going to get me other than just resentments and anger and sitting around feeling sorry for myself, which was a grieving process I had to go through. But at a certain point, it was my choice whether I'm going to stay there forever or not. And I chose that I wanted a life again that had purpose and meaning, and that service was the thing that was going to give it to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really what makes humans a lot different from just animals, that we can think about what we think about. And the fact that we can attach meaning to our experience and why this happened, it's a beautiful thing. And I just really wish for people to just settle into themselves and not be afraid. As I was reading your book and just watching you go through the different phases and how you were able to just get a little ahead, and then sometimes it felt like you fell back, then you got
Mhm.
a little further and then you would fall back. I think that was so great for you to explain to people, because just because you keep falling back doesn't mean that it's not going to get better. It doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't working. Um, what was your role in getting help? And is that the reason why you're ultimately a therapist and a clinician today, to just sit down? I think you do marriage counseling also, which working with couples to better their relationships, I think is so powerful. If we could just start by having good and better intimate relationships, I think a lot of the world's problems would go away. But, a lot of our pains come out in the world, in our work. We could be having a bad day because an argument that we had. We don't like, why are we having these arguments? Why are we having these, intense relationships? So, what was the role in help? And was that the thing that got you to like escape instead of going up and down, and then to kind of transcend your problems so that you could then turn around and help other people? What was the role of help in your journey?
Well, sometimes I think we need to hear something 1,000 times before it finally sticks the 1,001st time.
Yeah.
And I think that, life was handing me a lot of lessons that I just wasn't really ready to absorb and integrate yet. And part of the reason is that, I mean, certainly for an addict, there's a thing called denial, right? And
Mhm.
you tend to rationalize the ways in which you don't want to change. It's more comfortable sometimes just to stay in a state that's even miserable than to consider change, because change is scary. I'd rather the devil I know than one I don't. And that can keep us trapped in a way of being that isn't serving us anymore, just because we're scared of um, taking that advice and going to another place that might be foreign and new, and therefore scary. I think for me, the reason why I put that a lot of that in the book in terms of taking 3 steps forward and then taking 2 steps back is that we talk a lot about progress, not perfection. And this is true for personal development, personal growth, as well as for career and business. It's not always a straight line to success, personally or professionally. A lot of times you take a few steps forward, you have a setback, you learn from that setback, and then you have to kind of pick yourself up and get moving again. If you're not able to tolerate that, then of course every setback just sets you right back to the beginning and you're not able to keep moving forward. But if you have a mindset of progress, not perfection, you realize that every time you take 3 steps forward and then you take 2 steps back, you've still taken 1 step forward. And if you look back over 6 months or a year and you look at all those steps, it's added up to something significant. And so for me, I think it was finding the humility that my way of doing things was not working. It was keeping me stuck and not able to take steps forward because I was so defensive and in denial. Um, and so finding the ability to surrender and let go of my way of doing things and accept the help that was being offered to me. I had been offered help a few times and it didn't stick until I was really truly humbled to the point where I was just ready to do whatever others offered me, because my way really just wasn't working. And it was at the Betty Ford Center here in Southern California that I started that journey. And it was terrifying. I mean, I'm not going to lie. When you don't know what your life is going to look like the next day, let alone next year, I mean, and you're just filled with anxiety. And I know that I don't have these coping tools that I've been using anymore. I can't rely on taking a drink to relax my nerves. I can't rely on taking a pill to ease the stress or the anxiety. Um, what does that mean? How am I going to cope? How am I going to overcome this if I don't have those things? Well, I know those things aren't helping, so something else maybe will be better. And it was at first just that humility of I may not even understand it, what is being offered to me. It may be foreign to me, it might be scary, but it's got to be better than what I've been doing. um, and I think that I learned so much in a very short period of time, just watching the people who were a few steps ahead of me that were sort of offering a lifeline back, paying it forward to the next guy, that I very quickly picked up on what recovery looked like. And it was that element of service, because people were being of service to me, whether it be fellow sober friends in the program, or it was therapists, or it was people in an AA. I realized that once I had even a week or two of recovery and the things I learned from those people, I could offer those things to the people that were just coming in and that were new. And so now I had purpose. Now I had something I could offer. And so whether it was accepting help or giving help, it both of those things felt very purposeful to me. And it was just a logical next indicated action process. I talk a lot about the next indicated action. You don't have to have a 5-year plan. You need goals. Obviously, for me, I wanted to be free and clear of the things I had been struggling with and finding a life that had purpose in it again. But I didn't have a very well-designed plan of what that was going to look like and how I was going to get there. I just needed to know what the next indicated action was. What's the next thing that takes me from here to the next step? And that might mean one day I just need to go to an AA meeting to make sure that I don't drink today and that I hear some of the things I need to hear and that I have an opportunity to be of service to others. That's what I need to do today. And then once I get there, I'll figure out what the next indicated action is. And I think that's true in career as well. It's like you might have long-term goals in terms of, well, I someday want to be the CEO of a company, or I someday want to start my own business, or I someday, um, whatever it is that your ambition is, you don't have to know every step of that journey. That's because you can't know, right? You can't know until you know what it is that you're going to have to do to accomplish all of those things. You just have to know what the next step is, right? What can I do today that can take me one step closer to that goal? And the next indicated action is something that leads you to the next indicated action. So it's like it never ends. It always propels you forward. And for me, it was just following that impulse of purpose and fulfillment that was driven by service. So it was just what do I got to do today to get out of self-obsession? What do I got to do today that's going to keep me on my track of sobriety and recovery from all the things I've been struggling with? And that led me to volunteering at a recovery center after I was done with my program. For 2 years, I was doing co-leading groups and doing peer support. And in the process of that, I discovered that I had some talents that I could be compassionate and empathic with some of the people coming into the program and tell them my story and offer them some hope. Um, and I had a lot of people telling me, "Have you thought about doing this professionally?" And I really hadn't, but it felt so good to have a talent, and it felt so good to be able to build my own self-esteem at the same time that I was helping others. And so that just kind of it offered the next indicated action, which was to go back to school and to get a master's degree in clinical psychology en route to becoming a therapist. Doing that reminded me that I loved writing. I always loved writing. I had to write these papers, but I had been stuck in my perfectionism and stagnant for a long time because nothing was ever good enough. But now I had to turn in papers, and so I had to finish them and get a grade. And then I realized, oh, I actually really enjoy this, and I can get past that perfectionism. And that's what led to me writing the book, because I realized it was something that was purposeful. It was something that was passionate for me. I enjoyed it. And now this tragic story that I've been telling myself for a decade had a happy ending. It ended with hope, and it ended with me having new purpose in my life, and it having nothing to do with my past and everything to do with my future. And so everything has been the next indicated action. It's just been the next thing that's propelled me forward towards that ultimate goal of a fulfilling life. And that never ends. That's a process that goes forever. And I think that when we think of things also as progress, not perfection, it's in regards to that. It's like you can think, I want to make $1 million. I want to make $20 million, whatever it is. If you think you're going to get to that goal and then you're going to be happy, you're probably going to be disappointed. You have to think of that as just another milestone in a journey that has something to do with something bigger than that. It's not just some marker that you're achieving. It's a process. It's a process of building a life that you can be happy with, that you can be content with and feel purpose and fulfillment in.
Yeah, this is so great. I work with a lot of Navy SEALs just, in business. I wanted to reach out to people that I believe were top performers to get myself, properly equipped. I think this is what happens to people, especially in business. We come in, we don't have the skill set. So we're told that we have to be confident. So we
Mhm.
then start telling ourselves, like, I have to act a certain way, I have to be a certain way, I have to demonstrate strength in a certain way. And I love that you mentioned this, because what I've found when I look at people and when they fall off and then their careers literally just fall apart, it's because they lack humility. And
Mhm.
that confidence that you are feeding yourself with, it doesn't allow you to say, like, I don't have all the answers. Like, I need help. I need to reach out to someone. Maybe I need to listen to someone with a different viewpoint and just let go of what I'm hanging on to so strong. And I love what you say, because it lines up with how they are. They make it through their training by making it to lunch. They're not
Hmm.
thinking like, I'm gonna make it through the week. They're like, nope, I'm making it to lunch. Then I'm gonna
Hmm.
make it to the next crucible and I'm gonna get through this step by step. So I think that's powerful for people to hear because it's not all or nothing. Like you said, it's not like I can't do this for 10 years. I'm not doing this, or I can't see myself dedicating my whole life to this. Would you have ever thought when you were in Maroon 5 that you're doing what you're doing right now? And you're probably, maybe you're happier than someone who's in that line of business and you feel more fulfilled. So I think it's just so good for people to hear your story and then to relate to it in their own way. If we can, just kind of wrap up with talking about relationships, because in your book you go over your relationship with Shan. And one of the things that we do sometimes is we kind of slowly damage relationships. Like we chip away at them and we take little notches at people. And then we wonder why it just like collapses in front of us. And so, what you were able to do with your relationship with her, and then just going through that process of even that moment where she looked at you, you went through such a hard time and you got to this place where you were radiating light. And she was like, kind of like admiring you from a point of view, like, I want to now learn from you. And that's the beauty of relationships. Sometimes one person is more strong and you carry them, then the other person becomes strong and you carry them. But like, just to understand the long-term benefit of that. Could you like elaborate on just how important that relationship was for you and how you guys worked that out together?
Yeah, well, Sean and I were together for a long time. We've met when I was still in college, when I was about 23 years old, when we were writing the songs that would become the album Songs About Jane. Um, and we had such, a crazy journey through so many different phases of life where um, I graduated college, we made this record. I went on the road for 4 years. How do you maintain a relationship in your 20s when you're on the road for 4 years? I mean, when I say on the road, I mean, we were not home for more than like 2 days at a time. We were on
Mm,
the road in 2002 and 2003 alone. We played over 500 shows in those 2 years combined. And that wasn't even including things like radio appearances, TV appearances, meet and greets, acoustic in-store performances. Uh, and when you add it all up together, there were probably more performances than there were days in those 2 years.
mm,
So, it was just relentless. So that was really challenging. And we broke up a couple times in the course of that. And then we went through that whole phase when I left the band. And I went through a really tough time in my life. And of course, that's going to take a toll on your relationships. And so that was a real struggle. And I think at different times in our life, as you mentioned, we we kind of changed off roles of like who was the caretaker and who was the caretakee. I think it's weird that we find each other in these kind of trauma bonds, in our lives because when we met, we were both kind of thriving in a certain way. I mean, I was in school, I was, getting signed to my second record deal. I had a thriving social life and creative and professional life. She had just graduated from college a couple years before that. She was having a good time, had a big circle of friends and stuff. Everything looked really good on the surface. It seemed like this is just this great couple that has everything going for them. And then life got difficult in some ways, and then some of our deeper wounds kind of came out, and we realized why we may have been attracted to each other in the first place. And so there were times when I was really struggling, and she was kind of there to try to take care of me. And then there were times when she was struggling that I was trying to take care of her. And in some ways, that's beautiful, and it was, a lot of love and a lot of support. In other ways, it was kind of codependent. To be honest, it was I tried to refrain in the writing of the book to get to like clinical and like spell out what it was that was going on with a lot of these things, because I was in grad school when I was writing it, and I had that impulse to do a sort
Yeah.
of case study on myself, but I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be just a story that people could relate to, because I think we all have these experiences in our lives and in our relationships, and every relationship is different, but they're all good and bad at times. There are times when they're healthy, there's sometimes when they're not so healthy. And I think I look back on the course of that relationship and everything we went through, and we really did support each other in a lot of ways. Um, and then at times, we were kind of wrapped up in our own sort of addictive cycle together. And so when I, finally found recovery, and I give her a lot of credit for the moment in my life when I was humbled so much that I was ready to accept help, the fact that she was willing to let go enough to let me go on my own journey. I think that was scary for her. It was like we were wrapped up in this little world together. And the idea of me going out and going into rehab and starting a new life of recovery was probably in some ways threatening to our relationship, because it was like, who knows? This is going to be a lot of change from what we know. And I'm going to be in a different world than I had been in. And so for her to say, I don't care what it means for our relationship or for me. I don't want to see you living this way anymore. I want to see you get help, and I want to see you healthy. That was a really selfless thing for her to do, and a really supportive thing, and probably a really difficult thing for her to do. Um, and so it allowed me to go into recovery wholeheartedly. Um, and it was challenging though, because she would come to visit me, and I remember the first time that we went out to dinner when I was at Betty Ford, and I was able to go sort of off campus. Uh, and I remember we went to the California Pizza Kitchen in Palm Desert or Palm Springs or wherever we were. And that was a challenge, because you're walking in, and you immediately, of course, you hear glasses clinking, you see the bar, you see people drinking martinis and glasses of wine, and that was kind of overwhelming to my senses. Um, but we sat down to eat dinner, and the first thing she asked me was like, "So, what does this mean for me? Does this mean I have to be sober too? I can't ever have a glass of wine again?" Um, and I was very honest with her. I was like, "Well, I can't tell you how to live your life, but I just know I can't have alcohol in my home. That's not going to work for me." Um, and she said, "Well, for how long? Forever? For 6 months? For a year?" I said, "Well, let's start with 6 months and let's see what that gets us." And she was willing to do that. She was willing to not have any alcohol in the house for 6 months. And then it turned out to go on for a year or longer. I don't know how long it was. And so these are tough conversations for people to have. Well, when that's a lot of change. You're either growing together or you're growing apart, right? And I
Yeah.
think that the moment that you referred to was when I came out of inpatient and came home. It was clear that the spirit of recovery had gotten into my bones. We sometimes refer to it as a spiritual awakening. I know some people kind of roll their eyes at that. I wasn't a particularly spiritual person before that, but I just felt that I was awakened to life. I was awakened to connection to people, connection to something greater than myself. I didn't have a working definition of what that was. I just knew it was bigger than me and my problems, right? So it was clear. I think if you just met me at that moment in my life, that there was like a glow coming off of me.
Yeah.
It was switched on. There was life in me again. I was clean and sober, and so obviously physically healthier, but also just feeling this purpose and this connection. And she could see that. And she could see it was something very different than she'd seen in a long time. And I was honestly expecting her to have the reaction of, "Oh, I don't know what to do with this. Like, he's going to be in this place where he's so healthy. Am I healthy enough to be in that place with him? Is he going to find somebody else who's healthier to be his partner now?" I was expecting that, honestly, but that's not what she said. Because she was crying, and I was like, "Is she sad? Is she worried?" And she said, "No, I'm so happy for you. I'm actually a little bit jealous.
Hmm.
I'm jealous. I was looking at this light that's coming out of you, and I wish I could find the same thing. I don't know how to tap into that. I'm not in the same place that you're in terms of like having gone to rehab and found this spiritual awakening. And I was so happy to hear that because I was like, well, this is available to all of us. It's just if you're able to open yourself up to it, if you're able to be humbled enough to recognize that I'm stuck in my ways and I need to let go of certain things and be open to a process of help and of recovery. And there were different stages to this. At a certain point when I went back to school, and I told her, I'm gonna become a therapist. I'm gonna get a master's degree. Without missing a beat, she was like, "Can I do that too? I want to go back," because she had meant to go back and get her master's right out of undergrad, but life happened, and it was 20 years later now. But she wanted to still do it, and she saw me doing it, so she's like, "Yeah, I want to get my master's in social work." And so we both went back to school at the same time. And so you look at this, just how relationships can evolve over time, and sometimes things that are really healthy can turn unhealthy, and sometimes things that are unhealthy can turn healthy if two people are supporting each other and are able to grow together rather than apart.
Yeah, this is so great. I just want to say thank you for your time. As I said in the beginning, reading your book, it has to take a lot of courage to just face your past, but not from a victim point of view, but just to get it out. And then to like be able to say, like, this is what I did. This is, I'm not trying to like put up this facade of I'm perfect and I'm, you know, getting to where I want to be. There's still things you have unanswered. And, the truth is there's still so much that you don't know that's going to unravel in a best of ways in your life. And it's not for us to know, but it's for us to discover. And so I just want to say thank you for your time, for your energy, for your book. If I'm listening to this conversation and I want to know more because I want to be able to like do some work myself, like I'm not trying to escape, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I want to take accountability for my life. I want to lead my life. And then maybe I want to be able to help others through my process of healing myself. How can I connect with you? How can I learn more? What can I do to just reach out to you to like learn what you did, and then grow in my journey for myself.
Well, thank you. First off, the easiest way to get in touch with me is through my website, ryandusick.com. On there's separate sections for therapy, for coaching, which are slightly different things.
Mhm.
Um, for my speaking engagements, for my book, Harder to Breathe, and for my podcast, Harder to Breathe. Um, there's a lot there to sort through, but the book is kind of the starting point in terms of just hearing my story, and getting a sense of what it took for me to overcome some of these things. The intent is that it's hopeful. That's ultimately what the takeaway is, hopefully. But you can keep up with me on Instagram at Ryan Michael Dusick. The Harder to Breathe podcast, we're really proud of it. We're just growing it. It's only been out for half a year and we're just kind of getting things going, but we've already done a lot that we're really proud of. We're going to start season 2 in January, I think. So check that out. You can find it on anywhere that you get your podcast and on YouTube, video on YouTube. Am I forgetting anything? Yeah, reach out to me,
Yeah,
ryandusick.com.
that's so great. Thank you for just having the ability to make your story accessible to so many that are, wanting to be famous, but really like we can all be famous in our own way. Like just be significant at whatever you do by learning to serve more people than just ourselves. So I think that's a beautiful, beautiful message. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you so much.